All right, we are going to continue with the season previews. We're going to talk about Detroit, and there is a point to talking about Detroit. And I have to say, I had expected to like their reverse retro more in person, and it is kind of a plain, washed out kind of look. But anyways, the Detroit Red Wings had one of the worst seasons we've seen. Period. Last year. Now, 73 points was their total in 2017-2018. They went up to 74 points the following season, but last year they bottomed out and it projected out to over an 82 game schedule, 45 points. Abysmal season, pretty much from start to finish. And I've said it was by design. Now, I know there are people who say, well, no, Yzerman didn't tank it. I'm not saying he tanked it. I'm saying that he understood that this team was a long way from contending, and he shored things up a bit with like the Fabry trade, but he understood, okay, this team's going to struggle. I have to let them go through their struggles and then try to use the draft to build. And he picked up Lucas Raymond in the draft, who does project to be an excellent top forward. He's not on the board because he's already being hyped, and he's not going to be a rookie this season in all likelihood, depending on the ending of the SHL season and whether or not Detroit brings him over or what they do. But it's going to be an interesting year. And it can't be as bad as last year. It can't be as bad as last year. Nothing can be that bad. And over a 56-game schedule and only having to worry about 7 other teams, maybe they can figure something out, although their record against the division is not encouraging. So, out of the lineup, Jimmy Howard is gone. Jimmy Howard had a miserable season. Absolutely just all across the board, miserable season for him. His numbers were down. Detroit didn't play as well when he was in net either. They definitely seemed to play better for Bernier. Bernier's record was much better and his numbers were better. So Howard's still out there as a UFA. I kind of hope he gets picked up by somebody, as even if it's as a number 3. But we'll see. Justin Abdelkader, of course, got bought out. Daly retired. Bowie's gone. Erickson, Perlini, and N. And I don't think there's anybody on that board that Detroit fans are necessarily going to say, wait, we lost those guys. I don't think there's going to be a lot of upset. This was a team that was pretty bad. The Hockey News Power Ranking has them 31st, and both Sports Forecaster and yours truly has them finishing 8th in their division. So do they finish 31st overall again? That's the real question here. Is this going to be the worst team in the league back-to-back years? That very rarely happens. That's why I've said, you know what? They probably won't be the worst team in the league this year. Because it very, very rarely ever happens that we see a team the worst in the league for 2 straight years. So, if we're looking at it from a point of view of teams in their division, are there any teams in their division they can catch? I don't think so. But does it mean they'll end up being last overall? I don't know. And then, how do you figure out the draft if you have, let's say, a team's in a really rough division and they end up with a bad record, but you have another team that's in a mediocre division and they end up with a better record, right? And then you got the draft lottery. There's going to be all kinds of reasons for people to furrow their brow and wag their finger in 2021. And Detroit might be one of them. Too low, scoring-wise, for Detroit, there were a few. Dylan Larkin stands out to me. 71 games, 19 goals, 34 assists, 53 points. He is the centerpiece. He's going to be the captain. And Larkin is one of the faces of the future of the franchise. The offense needs to be better than that. And I think he'd admit that. Bobby Ryan coming over from Ottawa. I think he's going to count on scoring a little bit more now that his own personal issues have been set aside and he's seemingly got himself together. 24 games, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points. Keep in mind, of those 5 goals, 3 of them a hat trick against Vancouver. So, in the other 23 games, he scored a grand total of 2 goals for the Senators. Now, I don't know if he ends up with top 6 minutes, if he ends up on the third line, what happens, but we'll see. And then Philip Zadina, 28 games, 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points. I think he's going to end up being one of their centerpieces. They've got a lot of good young forwards. Zadina and Raymond, it'll be interesting to see if they have chemistry on the same line. If they end up together, does Rasmussen end up playing with them? Does Veleno end up coming up and playing with them? Veleno's been pretty good in Europe, so just throwing out there, Veleno might be a dark horse to make this roster this year too. So in goal scoring, they scored 2 per game. That's 31st. Allowed 3.73 per game. also 31st. And I don't know that it was necessarily close in either the goals for or goals against category. Again, they can't be this bad again. They can't allow almost 2 more goals per game than they're scoring. Power play, 14.88%, which was 29th overall. Amazing they're not last with a number that low. Penalty kill, they were last, 74.34%, which is 31st. The combined number between the power play and penalty kill is 89. That's way too low. That's abysmal. So that's an issue for them. Their big additions up front, I went with Bobby Ryan. On the blue line, Troy Stetcher. And in net, Thomas Greiss. I don't expect Greiss to be able to put up the kind of numbers in Detroit that he was putting up with the Islanders, but his numbers will be better than what Jimmy Howard was putting up last year. That alone should allow Detroit to win more games than what they won last year. At the very least, at a better rate than they were winning last year. And so the future's bright. And yet when I get into the core six, there's the one problem I have. And it comes back to that goaltending question. So up front, I could say Larkin, Mantha, Bertuzzi. They're young forwards. That's your young core up front. And Raymond may end up replacing one of those guys as a core guy when he joins the team. Maybe Veleno does. Maybe Zadina gets in there. A lot of good young talent, right? On the blue line, I have Hronik, who's still young, and he's still developing. And I went with Lindstrom, and I've got an asterisk there because Lindstrom is also, for me, the rookie to watch for Detroit. But he is such a smart, defensive-minded defenseman, and it just seemed so natural to him right from his first game in Detroit. I was very impressed with him. And so he may end up being a core guy now. This may be a guy, and Cholowski may end up getting into that spot too, showing that they have a lot of good young defensemen too. It's just a matter of putting it all together at the NHL level. But then you get to goaltending. Calvin Pickard's still listed as their number 3. I don't know that they have a goaltender in their system that's going to come up and be the next guy. So you've got Greiss, who's almost 35, and Bernier, who's 32. And neither of them are the long-term solution to goaltending woes for Detroit. So Detroit could be in the market for another goaltender this coming summer. And that could be an area where maybe you look to the draft. Maybe this year Yzerman looks into the draft and says, all right, I'll grab a couple of goalies. Because they definitely do need some more depth in net than what they have. And it might be one of those issues for them. And again, Greiss and Bernier as a tandem is not awful. It is not an awful tandem. And yet I do wonder how many games they're going to be able to win. This is potentially going to be a long season again. But it can't be as bad as last year. Now their coach is still Jeff Blashill. Yeah, Jeff Blashill, there were times last year where we were looking at, okay, so all of these coaches have been fired. Blashill still has a job. And it got to the point where we stopped tracking it because it wasn't funny anymore. But maybe Blashill's there until this team gets good. Maybe Yzerman, as the general manager, looks at this team and says, we don't have anything to judge Blashill by because we haven't given him a team that can compete for a playoff spot. So I'm not going to get rid of the coach until we've seen this team, with a really competitive roster and see what he can do with it. If you're a glass half full kind of fan, well, last season has to be the worst, right? And it was heartbreaking to listen to the commentary. If you listen to the commentary through the Detroit station, Mickey Redmond, it was tough to listen to him at times because you could tell he wanted to strangle some of these players, that he was miserable. So for Mickey Redmond's sake, I want to see the Red Wings play better. He hasn't seen them play since March. When they do get to play next month, I really hope for Mickey's sake that they're better. Because I didn't blame him. I could not blame him at all. Where they'd be down, 3-1, and he'd be like, all right, come on, guys, come on. And then they'd allow 2 more goals. And be like, yeah. And you could just hear it. You just hear it in his voice. This is a guy who's been a fan of this team for a very long time. It has to be hard. And I know you get all those Stanley Cups and you think, oh, well, then it's easy. You've had all those Stanley Cups. It's not. Watching a team go through this, and then the question becomes, how soon can you pull yourself out of this mess? And will the team get back to being a contender? What's going to happen with them? Because there are teams that get stuck in mediocrity for a long time. Glass half empty? Well, there's still lots of work to do. There's still a lot of work left to do. So while, yes, they've improved parts of the roster, I think Greiss is an upgrade, as I've said, over Howard. And Stetcher's a good addition on the blue line. and they added Bobby Ryan, and they've added some good players. The reality is this is still a team that's going to struggle to stay out of or get out of the basement in the National Hockey League. And the next big hype for this team, because I've talked about all these other prospects, is going to be Jonathan Berggren. So if you're not talking about Berggren yet, you're going to be. Berggren, by all accounts in Europe, absolutely lights out. And once he comes over to play in North America, he could be one of those scoring players they're going to need. So they're never again worried about being 31st in scoring in the NHL. That's the thing. Berggren may very well be as part of a solution to that. And Raymond is going to be a huge part of that solution too. So the European influence on this team is going to be massive. And of course, Moritz Seider, depending on how it works out between the end of their season and where Detroit's at and all that, maybe Seider makes his debut before the end of the year. We'll see. But when you look at their month-by-month record, it was a bad year. If you feel like, as a Detroit fan, you never had a reason to smile last year, you might very well be right. They were 4-8-1 in October, 3-11-2 in November, 3-9 in December. So by losing 3 months of the year to the NHL pushing the season back into January, at least those are 28 regulation losses you didn't suffer this year. So, yay. January 2-8-1. February 3-11-1, and then in March they were respectable 2-2, which is, that's great. You know, I mean, at least they finished 2-2 in March, right? You're looking for a silver lining. You can say, hey, we were 500 in March. It's only 4 games, but we'll take it. So yeah, it was a long year for Detroit, a really long year. And then you look at their record against teams in this division, and it's not necessarily that great either. Against Columbus, they lost all 3 games in regulation. Against Carolina, they lost all 3 games in regulation. Against Florida, they lost all 3 games in regulation. But against Nashville, against Chicago, against Tampa, and against Dallas, they were 1-1 against all 4 of those teams. So it ends up being a record of 4-13-0 against teams in their own division. It's a daunting task that Detroit has now that they've bottomed out to try to come back up. And yes, it would be tempting to say, well, you know, if Detroit could get the number 1 draft pick this year, right, the number 1 draft pick, likely Owen Power, you add Owen Power to that blue line, you're kind of set. But don't wager on whether or not you're going to win draft lotteries. Take it from somebody who cheers for the Canucks. Don't ever wager on winning a draft lottery. It's just a bad idea. And yeah, this is a team that I think the worst is probably done. I can't see them producing points at that same anemic rate that they did last year. This is just awful all around. And I think when we get into the 2021-2022 season, we can start talking about improvements to the Wings and what things are going to look like. I think we're still in the midst of kind of the middle of the picture of what Yzerman wants this team to become. So we'll see what happens with the goaltending. We'll see. I mean, it's kind of set for this year, but what happens going forward and who that future goaltender is for them. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.